and myself, Dale Hansen, I'm here. So we do have a quorum. And Tom, are you running the meeting in Bill's absence?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the agenda package here.
I guess we should recognize some of the other people like Steve Quillisi, who is here for the Planning Commission. Sousa and Bill, are you both here representing the city?
Bill Wyrick's got another engagement, he said.
Yeah, 4:15, I got to run.
No, you're thinking about
Okay.
Bill Ulrich.
No, Bill Wyrick. So we're going to talk fast.
Bill
Yeah.
Wyrick,
No, just go on. Susan's listening in, and I'm
Amy
liaison
Wyrick.
this quarter to the BAB.
Okay. Is
All right,
Quilici?
Tom, you're on.
I'm
Okay.
here on next quarter, but I'm jumping in early.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay, so Tom, Farmer.
Yeah, you want
My computer
me-
shows 4 o'clock, so I'd like you to start this meeting.
Yeah, it's 3:59.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll do away with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Right, okay.
I already did it this morning anyway, so.
Okay,
So,
you have-
public communications. Do we have any public communications?
do we have any public communications?
Not that we know of.
We have
Okay.
received
There were no
public
email.
communications.
Okay, Tom. Consent items. Do you want me to, I guess we can just go into the minutes of the regular meeting of the Building Appeals Board, November the 25th.
Yeah,
Recommendation approved as submitted. Is there any,
I
changes to
move,
that?
I move we approve as submitted. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second it.
all right? So it's been, Bob made the motion. Dale seconded it.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion's carried then. I guess the next one is to discuss the REACH codes. And I guess this is where you come in, Tom, or?
Yep, I'll do a quick introduction.
Okay.
And then we're going to have the presentation take over from there. Just give me
Okay, sounds good.
one moment. Just to pull up my information.
Have they, are they logged in? Are they ready for the presentation?
Yep.
Well, Phil's here. And I see Michelle Ellison is signed on and Steve Fuller.
This is Phil White. I'm on the climate committee, and
There's Michelle.
Steve Polame is here.
Okay,
Bill Ellison is here. There's 3 of us from the committee, and there's also Amy Ryder, who's from the Decarbonization Coalition, and going to do the presentation today to your group, BAB. So we're here to add on to whatever Amy might have to say and be available to answer questions if you have any.
sounds
All
good.
right.
I think we're
So,
still waiting
Tom?
maybe for Brian Holly. I think he's going to be joining.
No, we can't wait. You know
Okay.
what?
Yeah.
We're going to
That's
be
fine.
on time. This is going to be like school.
Yep, no problem.
So I'm just going to give a quick overview of what the goal is today. And then I'm going to pass it off to Amy Ryder, who was selected to give the committee presentation. So several months back, the Climate Committee requested an item be placed on the City Council agenda for the City Council to consider adoption of the REACH codes. Because the REACH codes could potentially impact the city's building codes, the City Council requested that the BAB receive a presentation on the REACH codes and consider making a recommendation to the City Council. Tonight's meeting is to allow for that presentation, to allow for the BAB to ask questions, and to allow for the BAB to consider a recommendation. With that, I recommend you receive the presentation from Amy Ryder, who was selected by the Climate Committee to make this presentation.
Okay,
Before we launch into that, I wanted to give some brief introduction about the Climate Committee. I'm Michelle Ellison on the Climate Emergency Mobilization Committee. I'm joined, as Phil had mentioned, by at least 3 other of our committee members. Steve, Brian was going to join us, and Phil. Jim Selman couldn't be here. We're grateful to have this opportunity to meet with you all. By way of brief background, the Climate Committee was formed last December as a result of the city's declaration of a climate emergency, and the 5 of us were appointed by council. Over the past 9 months, we've been meeting regularly. We hosted a workshop in January to gather input and ideas from the community. We've provided ongoing updates to council and issued an interim report to council in June, summarizing key findings and recommendations. Our role is focused specifically on climate mitigation, which means we're tasked to identify key ways for the city to reduce emissions, sequester carbon, and lead by example. Currently, the 2 largest sources of emissions in Ojai are transportation and buildings. One of the most significant ways for cities and counties across the state to drive down emissions in buildings is through local energy ordinances, also known as REACH codes. In fact, our very own Ventura County Board of Supervisors just 2 weeks ago adopted a policy in the general plan update prohibiting gas infrastructure in new construction. So that'll apply to the unincorporated areas of the Ojai Valley. So we're in good company as we consider these opportunities for the city of Ojai. Our committee has invited Amy Ryder of the Building Decarbonization Coalition. Amy works throughout California to help local governments like ours with REACH codes. She'll provide us with an informational presentation, which I believe will last about 15-20 minutes, leaving ample time for questions and discussion. Our committee is very interested in hearing your perspectives and considering your input as we formulate and develop our recommendations to council. So without further ado, welcome Amy.
Thanks so much, Michelle. I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation here, and so that you can all see it. So you should be able to see a bright, pretty sunset on the screen there. Let me know if you have any trouble with that, but I'll go ahead and get started. Again, thanks for that great introduction, both Tom and Michelle. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this evening. I am Amy Ryder. I'm with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and I figure it's worth just giving you some background as to what that is. So the Building Decarbonization Coalition is a membership-based coalition. We are a not-for-profit that works across the state of California as well as in other states, but our concentration and staff are all here locally in California at this point in time. And we have membership that really spans a lot of different variety. We have local governments, we have some NGOs, we also have manufacturers and utilities. So it's a wide representation. And my goal in this presentation is to give you a little bit of our background in terms of what we've been working on and share with you what's happening around the state with regard to REACH codes. We launched this particular initiative almost 2 years ago now, where local governments were asking, how can we make a difference when it comes to really implementing our climate action plans, and what's the most meaningful action we can take. So I'm going to give you some background here, talking about why building electrification has really risen to the top of most local governments' lists, as well as some of the benefits of that approach and how they've gone about it, kind of the mechanics and process of how one adopts a REACH code. So as Michelle alluded to, buildings are a substantial portion of the greenhouse gas emissions across the state. And Ojai is not unusual in this way, where certainly low occupancy or single occupancy vehicles are the biggest. Transportation is giant, but buildings are actually a fairly close second at 24% of the total emissions. So on the far left-hand side of this particular slide, you can see the breakdown here. And so it's just important to understand the scale and where we can make inroads really to progress on climate action plans. And you'll notice here the blue part of this bar is electricity. So that is not an insubstantial portion. As we'll talk about more as we go forward, Ojai's balance looks differently than this does because your electricity is clean. So that really helps to drive down your overall percentage, but it nonetheless is significant. So what we found with a variety of studies and other efforts that are happening around the state, and the state itself, the California Energy Commission, has really determined that in order to get to zero emissions, we really have to move toward an electric future, because we don't yet know how to get the emissions out of gas. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But really the pathway to clean electricity is really evident and already taking place. And as I already mentioned, Ojai is here. You're between 2030 and 2045, where the rest of the state will be, because you already have such a clean grid, which really helps to make progress. But it also helps to make electrification all the more logical when it comes to especially new construction, which is really the focus of our conversation this evening. And the good news is that the technology is absolutely ready. There is lots and lots of opportunity, and we can talk about the specifics if you like to some extent, but there are electric technologies for everything these days, with very few exceptions. So we can get into the details if you like, but the technology is ready. Just really briefly, I do think it's worth spending a moment on biogases and biofuels, because that is often seen as one potential option in it, that could bolster and be in addition to electrification. And certainly I think that there is a place for biofuels, but this study by Energy and Environmental Economics really shows that there is a giant gap between the demand and the supply with regard to biofuels. So the big takeaways here is on the far right, you can see where we are today in terms of total building and industry demand for gas, and where the currently estimated supply will be, being the kind of the middle line in the middle between 1.0 and 1.2, and then the gap that is needed for electrification and energy efficiency. That horizontal blue line there really shows that we can't get there with just biofuels, and electrification actually gets us a significant way there. And it is my personal belief, and it certainly is supported by the studies that are out there, that biofuels should probably be preserved for those things that are hard to electrify. And buildings are not one of those things. So that could be, jet fuel, for example. It's hard to electrify an airplane at any kind of scale, at least with the current technology. As the same is true for some of the just larger scale items like industry and mechanical equipment. So what are some of the benefits of taking this route of going for a zero emission building? Just walk you through. Really, it comes down to these four major things. They're cheaper, healthier, more climate friendly, which we've talked about, but we'll talk about again, and they're safer. So why is there an asterisk on cheaper? We'll get into that. They're absolutely cheaper to build without gas infrastructure. They're not always cheaper to operate, and the key there relates to whether or not, if you're talking about a conversion of an existing building, again, not directly applicable here, but I like to point this out, that if you have a home today that does not have air conditioning, you could incur higher rates of electricity usage if you suddenly go to a heat pump technology, which has air conditioning also, because it's a new load. Not necessarily, but there is potential for slightly higher bills if you're adding this new service. But for most people, it is cheaper to operate an electric building. And so let's look at some of those specifics. So really, one of the biggest savings here is new construction. We're avoiding the infrastructure of putting the gas in the first place. This is especially true with subdivisions, but it's no less true, although it's maybe a slightly lesser cost burden for an existing building site where you're building a new structure. But these are not small numbers. They're, $7,000 on average is the additional cost for building gas into a new construction project. And just to point out, that does add some, on the backside, some inaffordability for people to be able to buy. A study that came out earlier this year by the National home builders group actually says that more than 2,000 households are priced out of the market for every $1,000 increase in home price. So that's for $7,000 per home. That's roughly 15,000 homeowners who would be unable to afford a house that has gas today. So not just the infrastructure, but the technology itself, the appliances are available at similar or lower cost than natural gas appliances. So there's not much of in fact, there's no cost burden that comes from building new construction all electric. There's a perception problem, and we can talk through some of that as well, but the cost is not the issue. And just to summarize what that looks like is we have the savings, overall savings, $1,500 to $6,000 in construction cost, annual bill savings for residents, and then an additional bill savings for those with solar, which new construction is required to for all low-rise residential. So you're actually looking at an enormous opportunity to save. And then one piece that should go mentioned, at least, we don't need to go into detail, is that gas rates are rising. So there's also some insulation that happens to budgets when protecting them from increasing gas rates. So we can talk about that a little bit, but specifically the increases that are expected and they are universal. So Cal Edison is not immune from this. I don't know about Clean Power Alliance and their projected price increase over time, but generally they tend to be competitive compared to their investor-owned counterparts. But SoCalGas already has a 25% increase approved for their gas rates. So something to be aware of compared to Southern California Edison's 8% per year, which is slightly less, 14% overall. All right, let's talk about health for a moment. This is one it's always a little touchy because it's fairly new science how much awareness has gone into indoor air pollution. And it's become more problematic, especially new construction, where we've gotten to be so energy efficient and having a really efficient building envelope. So we don't allow hot air in or out, depending on the season, that it actually is harder to protect ourselves from the things we burn or pollute our air with inside the building. So this is just an example here of stoves in particular and all of the emissions that they create. And currently this is a fairly unregulated space. And just as a counterpoint, air pollution levels in many, many homes where they're burning gas for stoves in particular, they're seeing pollution levels that would be illegal if they were outdoors, but because they're inside, they're not regulated. Oops, sorry, too fast. So what the ramifications are for that, just so you're aware, is there is the potential, not insignificant increased risk for childhood asthma. 42% of current asthma, and then lifetime asthmatic rates of 24% increase, just again from those stovetops alone. So that single technology, of course, is the one that's most in our face and most directly likely to, in fact, impact our health, but it's also one of the more contentious ones. And then just to kind of put this all in perspective in terms of the cleanliness, certainly, there's been lots of motions, especially this last week with regard to light duty vehicles and the impact that transportation has on overall emissions. But buildings are not far behind when you compare them. So I just wanted to point that out. And then power plants are actually pretty insignificant. So that difference between the 18 tons per day of a power plant and the buildings is entirely natural gas. Can't talk in California without talking about resiliency and safety. I think that we all know how important this is these days. I am 15 miles from multiple active fire sites as we speak, so it's near and dear to my heart. And so just a couple of points there. And again, welcome to discuss this more. But sorry, was there a question? Okay, no, I'll go ahead and continue. So because electric appliances are electric, people worry about, well, they'll turn off in a power outage. That is absolutely true. Same is also true of gas appliances for new appliances because they require they require electricity to operate. The gas pilot lights are a thing of the past. You have to have an electronic ignition. So therefore, a gas appliance actually has an electric backup, which is required for operation. So you're not adding resiliency by having a gas appliance. But with an electric appliance, you can actually back it up more easily through the same setup of whether it's a generator or a battery system that runs off your rooftop or not. There's easier ways to back up the system if it's an electric appliance. And it has the added bonus of not having the combustibility of any kind of gas in your homes. So they actually recover faster during an emergency. The electric power is down about it's an eighth to a quarter of the time in a major emergency compared to gas infrastructure. So what can local governments do about it? Well, I'll tell you what they have been doing. There are 34 local governments in the state of California who have already taken action. And this is how they break down in terms of what the approaches those ordinances have taken. So in this particular pie graph, we have the natural gas infrastructure moratorium, which most people think of as the Berkeley approach, where they actually are disallowing the installation of the gas infrastructure itself. That's the blue slice of the pie in the top corner, the smallest piece. So that's the least common. Second to that is an electric preferred approach where the cities have opted to make all electric encouraged, but not disallow for a mixed fuel building that still has gas. And the way that mechanism typically works is that an all electric building would just be code compliant, and a building that has gas or mixed fuels in it would have to exceed code by a certain percentage, typically in the 10% range. So you would actually try to level the playing field because there are some inequities in how the code calculates the two at the moment. And then by far the most common is the all electric reach code, which is either electric required specific appliances or all electric for all appliances. And that's the most common approach that we've seen taken across the state. So I'm going to get a little nerdy here for just a minute about the energy code, which I imagine some of you are pretty familiar with, but just to give some background. So that the building energy code set by the state, also known as Title 24, Part 6, went into effect at the beginning of this year. And it is the base code, it's where the starting point is for all construction with regard to energy efficiency in the state of California. When they established this code, they actually set it up so that reach codes were encouraged by local jurisdictions to help the state understand kind of where the market is going and to help inform the next code cycle. So the next code cycle, that every 3 years they happen. And so the 2022 code is actually being designed right now. And so they're watching the reach codes around local governments very carefully to see what should be included in that 2022 code. So that's kind of how this fits into the broader scale of things and what's happening at the state. The current code does, as I said, have a bit of favoritism still embedded with natural gas. And that comes from 40 years of gas being the cleaner resource, frankly. I mean, that is where we have been for my entire career, for sure. And the technologies and the movement towards a clean electric grid in the last 5 to 10 years have changed that entire equation. And now the code is racing to catch up with that. And the reach codes are one way that we're able to help shift that code even further and faster toward showing which resource is the cleaner and preferred option. in order for a local jurisdiction to adopt a REACH code, it does have to meet these.
Amy?
Yes.
Hi, this is Bob Daddy.
Hi.
I was under the assumption that we were going to get things specific to Ojai, not what some of us have been doing for years. I don't want to be rude, but we have rewritten the entire Title IX for the city. We understand fully what's going on. What I was hoping to hear was some specifics, and what we're getting is extremely broad overview where I haven't seen any specifics. And I just like to ask one question whenever we have these things. What benefit will it bring Ojai and what consequences?
Sure.
And what I'm hearing is a whole bunch of things about being competitive. And I know Title 24, I understand about the climate, geography, topography. We really understand all that stuff. What I thought I was led to believe here was that when this climate committee got together, what they were going to do is come up with some ideas. They were going to help us with some ideas. They were going to help us with implementation. They were going to reach out and find out what they could do about getting grants and make recommendations with possible grants where we could make some actual changes and start to move this process down the road. And I've yet to hear any of that.
Okay, great. Well, it's a really
I've heard
good.
a very long presentation, but what I haven't heard is recommend to the city council that we no longer burn wood in fireplaces in the city of Ojai. We electrify our trolley immediately because it has very low ridership. What we do is we ask for solar-assisted hot water heaters and grants. We go ahead and inform people that money is available for them to put in solar attic fan to lower the energy use during the summer. There is a whole variety, and I guess I must not have read my material. I read all the Sierra Club material, and I read these other things, but I actually thought we were going to get some specific targeting. This just seems to be a general, don't we all want to end world hunger? Of course we do. Don't we want the air to be cleaner for my grandkids? Of course we do. But I thought this was going to be a how-to.
Well, Mr. Daddy, if you'll give me just a minute, I'll get to that. I just wanted to make sure you had the context. So it sounds like you're very well versed in this.
Well, this was a long and winding road. So, I see some people in the background nodding to stay awake. And I want them to be awake when it comes time to vote.
Well, I appreciate that, and certainly thanks for sticking with me. I'm almost to the specific stuff. I just want to make sure that we weren't lost on context. So it sounds like I maybe don't need to go into detail here about what's required to get to a local REACH code, but I did want to point out that it does have to be cost effective by definition in order for you to have a local REACH code. I know there's been there's always some concern about cost, and we've talked about that for sure. So the specifics in terms of the approach for a local building ordinance that we wanted to get into happens to be the next slide. And what we're seeing, and what I suspect the Climate Commission will weigh in here momentarily on, is the opportunity for Ojai to adopt some level of local ordinance that prefers or requires electric buildings. And so a local ordinance that, again, it's a REACH code, so it exceeds Title 24, addressing new buildings and major renovations. And then I think one of the places that they're looking for input on is which buildings types or all building types should be included there, and to what extent all electric should be required as the lowest emission option for new construction in particular, and specific to Ojai. So that was it. That was this is really the meat of the discussion. And I appreciate you sticking with me as we get through it. But the main piece here is what's the right flavor for Ojai in terms of how far, how fast can we stop digging the hole, so to speak, in terms of making emissions worse, and address new construction at the very least to start moving into the future that is all electric. So again, thank you for listening, and welcome conversation. I apologize to just a point of clarification for this format. I don't know how informal it is. I'm happy to field questions, but I'm also happy to be directed to do so. So please let me know what's most appropriate.
So Tom, your chair. We've got the
Yeah.
presentation. Are you going to go ahead and call for roll call? So Judy and Dale, and they can go ahead and weigh in, make comments, ask questions, as this is going to be a very long meeting at the rate we're going.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that the REACH Code Committee just came about in January of 2020. Is that right? Is that when City Council appointed the REACH Code Committee?
I think so.
There is no Reach Code Committee.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, Michelle, do you want to clarify? There is no Reach Code Committee. There's a climate emergency.
Climate, I'm sorry. Yeah, the climate, that to review the REACH Code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The committee was formed in December of 2019 after the city council declared a climate emergency of July of 2019. And so we don't just focus on REACH codes. That's one of our areas that we're investigating.
Can I
Okay,
ask?
so I think BAB just came aware of this just recently. Is that not right?
Well, I know that it started then, but I have a question I want to ask, and I'm not sure exactly how to say it. Can you folks hear me?
Not well.
Okay.
Go ahead.
It sounds like we're going to need a lot of electricity coming into Ojai. Is there enough electricity generated for Ojai to meet all of this? And like if we electrify our trolley and what about apartment buildings and rentals? Is there enough electricity coming into Ojai to meet that need? And if so, what does it come from? Is it from hydroelectricity? From somewhere else that's piped in here? Or is it from some giant coal-fired plant in Utah?
Yes, it is actually.
I mean, I'm not clear on how we do this. In 9 years, maybe 9 years we can, I don't know.
Yeah, so just a point of clarification there. So typically with these codes, what we're seeing is that yes, there is some capacity for electrifying new buildings. Also, because there's not a ton of construction happening at this moment, but because the technologies actually are using the excess capacity that is built in for those hot days and largely adding heating load, that there's the excess capacity on the grid today to take on any new construction you might come up with in the next few years. There's also many plans in place through Clean Power Alliance and others to expand the electrical grid and to have more both demand responsiveness so that it can be more resilient and to have more overall capacity because they're mostly because of electric cars. They're not worried about it with regard to buildings so much, but cars are certainly expected to be an added capacity need.
Okay.
This is Phil. I would like to address Dale's question. I'm on the County Planning Commission, and we've just been dealing with the county's 2040 general plan, which includes a new climate action plan. And for the unincorporated parts of Ventura County, it's not within the cities, but for the unincorporated parts of the county, the climate action plan includes a REACH code for new buildings. So this has already been adopted here within the county and here within the Ojai Valley. Be interesting to note that at the public hearing at the Board of Supervisors recently, when they approved it, that Southern California Edison appeared and testified in favor of the REACH code. I think there's every reason to believe that Edison and the Clean Power Alliance are ready to step up and serve as much electricity as is needed here.
And Phil,
they would be willing to do that, but you know what? Electricity is a cause of so many fires in California, the electric wires and so forth. How do we meet that? And also, how do we meet when the electricity is down? I've never had my gas go out, but I've had my electricity go off many, many times, and it may go off more in the future as we turn it off when fires are around us. I just think that, I mean, I don't know a lot about it. I've done some research on it, but certainly not enough. I'm not sure how we do this.
May I ask a question related to what Dale just said? I don't know who's running this meeting.
You are, you're on.
Okay. So, Amy, according to what you said, the ability to use gas depends on electricity.
That's correct.
That's correct.
No, that's not, no, excuse me, that's not correct. When the electricity goes out of our house regularly, because we placed a couple of dozen poles here regularly, we just take a little tiny little fireplace lighter and we heat and we click it and we turn on our gas stove and we can have food and coffee and cook eggs and do all kinds of things. So I want to make sure everybody makes sure that the gas water heater is going on without electricity. My gas stove is going on without electricity. I can't run my heater because it takes electricity to run the pump. But what other gas items do we have? That,
Yeah.
you know, you can light a gas oven with a kitchen match. So I don't want anybody to say gas doesn't work if you don't have electricity. It's more convenient to have electric starters, but that certainly isn't true. And it certainly isn't a reason for us to do anything about reach codes. That's just so far out of bounds for this discussion.
But Bob, I was asking the question. I wanted clarification on that point. I wasn't making an argument.
Okay.
Clear.
Yeah, and Bob is correct that you can use a match to start most existing appliances, especially those. But a new water heater, you cannot start with a match. And a gas stove, you might be able to. This is true. You won't be able to turn on your exhaust fan. So just be careful doing that. Please open your window. So yes, stoves are an exception with most technologies. There are some that have a safety feature that won't let you do that. But when it comes to water heating and furnaces and dryers, you cannot.
You can't with a dryer, but you can with an oven. And an oven does not have a vent, which is interesting.
Well, Bob, this is Phil speaking
Hey,
again.
Phil.
Let's talk about water heating. Yes, most people have grown up with gas water heaters, and we visualize that tank with the gas flame underneath it. But I now have a solar hot water heater in my house.
And Phil, that's kind of one.
Would you let me finish up?
Well, yeah, go ahead. But see, I don't really like where this is
Could
going,
I finish
Phil.
up?
Oh, wait.
So the solar water heater, a week ago, we had our power out all day while Edison put in insulated wires in our neighborhood, and I'm glad they did. But we had hot water all day because the solar system does store hot water. The furnace in the wintertime won't work. It needs electricity, so you don't have any heat. Yes, you can light the cooktop and boil some water or cook something, but as Amy points out, you can't run the exhaust fan that's above your stove to ventilate it. Our stoves and cooktops are vented. In most kitchens, people run the exhaust fan, but that requires electricity. So when you say, well, we're going to rely on our gas for the backup, there's really not much you can do with it.
Okay, so Phil, excuse me, have you got a vent for your oven, gas oven? No. And so what you guys keep doing is you're going to let me speak?
Oh, yeah.
You continue to make arguments that I don't think are relevant to this. What you're doing is chipping away at little functions. Let's talk about the entire thing. We have a number of things that we need to do, that we can do, that we can shortcut, that we can change so we rely less on fossil fuels. And those are some things that we need to do. We've gone through the BAB and we've rewritten the entire Title IX. We can write some more mechanisms in here that will change some of the building codes individually in certain areas. As far as solar assisted rooftop mounted water heaters, I am absolutely all for those things. And that's something I think we need to have a mechanism for remodel and for new. There are another number of things that we need to have different mechanisms. We need to have circulating hot water. We need to have interior insulation. We need to have all kinds of different things. But one of the things that I am hearing from people, and there was a nice full page ad in the LA Times today, and you said it needs to be affordable, and I'm not really sure affordable for who. And in the LA Times on page A5 today, Tuesday, September 29th, there was an open letter to the Sierra Club. And this from Info United Latino Voters. And I have a letter, and I'd like to read it. Dear Sierra Club, your advertisement open letter to the people of California, September 8, 2020, in the Los Angeles Times felt offensive and manipulative. The goals are at Admiral and in fact are already embedded in California law and policy. But the path you want the governor to take could hurt real people and real communities we represent. Your world is not our world. We are the rural and urban communities with our livelihoods in agriculture, small business, personal services. We keep the real economic engine running and risk our health and lives during the pandemic. We are the people who make up tough daily choices about how to drive to work, feed our kids, share a video screen for school, and take our parents to the doctors. All these things are hard. Your world would make them harder. Let's be particular on your 5 actions. You want to phase out, quote, polluting cars, the ones we drive to work and take our kids to the park in. It would require us to write hefty checks to buy those expensive electric vehicles you like so much, and then pay even higher energy bills to afford to drive them. You want to phase out, quote, dirty stoves, water heaters, and furnaces. Here again, it would require us, our landlords, to make investments we can't afford so our residences can be rewired for these new HVACs and appliances. We are committed to making homes more affordable so Californians can own homes, not to make them further out of reach. We don't understand how this works. We are advocates for sensible, fact-based, equitable energy policy. Your ideas would allow our rich neighbors in the town next to us drive their Teslas and run their air conditioners on hot days, but make it unaffordable to ours. Your plan sounds like you want us to foot the energy bill for the, quote, green buildings where you rent your office space, while our little businesses go broke with higher energy costs. Let's not wink and nod here. Bold, you know perfectly well that tens of millions of drivers in California drive hundreds of billions of miles in 2018, mostly just to get to work, and are not able to suddenly stop driving. So instead of going to import all that fuel from Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Russia, and transfer our high-wage energy jobs overseas while more Californians become unemployed, and that is more humane and equitable, question mark. When your funders from Frisco and Hollywood call your strong climate leaders to pick up the phone, when we call, we are encouraged to, quote, talk to our legislators. We know the drill. It seems to us like most with lifestyles only few can afford, and more important than people who work hard and pay taxes, build small businesses, schools, their children, and take hard choices to whether the kids can afford to go to college. Your world is not our world. Yours feels hypocritical and socially diverse, and disproportionately burden those who claim to support the most low-income and ethnic minority populations. We are advocates for sensible, fact-based, equitable energy. We come to the discussion in good faith with ideas for all Californians, and will hope to join us with ideas for all Californians as well. What I see this is a disproportionate burden on the minorities and the working class. And when I take a look at the people assembled in this rule, I do not see a person of color or ethnic background, except maybe myself, whose grandmother, Josephine Cruz, and great-grandmother, Vera Fuentes, and our family who's been here in California for 218 years, or my great-great-great-grandmother that was 100% Pima Indian. We take those people at the lowest end of the economic level, and we come up with these great, big, giant, wonderful ideas. And I would ask, how many people here are driving EVs? And how many have these other efficiencies versus the people that now make up a huge majority of California are not going to be able to afford this. And when we say we want to do this in 9 years in Ojai, this is going to be a massive movement. And I doubt that with 40 million people getting the government assistance, 14 million unemployed, 5.5 million people that are on government forbearance on their mortgage, and 3.5 million people in jeopardy of having their cars repossessed because they're 4 or month behind, that this is something that people are going to have an appetite for implementing at this time. And while I believe in a lot of the ideas and I push for them, I just don't think that this is the time right now to take this sign up and ask that this thing be adopted as a program. I think we need to get some time and we need to get our balance back. That's about all I have to say. Thank you.
I really appreciate that perspective, Mr. Daddy. It's certainly why we want to start with new construction, and why I don't think anybody here is talking about changing the buildings that people already live in and imposing cost upon folks who are already residents.
Excuse me, is this Amy? Who is this?
Yes.
Okay. When I read the 9-page, I don't want to call it manifesto on the city website. I'm not sure what it is. I'd say a statement. The statement was very clear to remove all combustible vehicles and all natural gas within the city. That was extremely understandable. And so help me if I don't understand that, because that is the position of the committee on the city's website. Is that incorrect?
I can't speak to the committee. I don't know. Committee members?
Okay, well, it is on the city website, and that's what was proffered, and that's all I have to go by.
Bob, this is Steve Colomay.
Hey, Steve, how are you?
I will note that I think you took probably more time than Amy did. And I would suggest that you take a look at who funded that article. It says Vote Latino, but
yeah.
look at where the money came from for that, and I think you'll be surprised. But the position of the committee is that we must, as a nation, as a state, as a county, wean ourselves of fuels, and that is going to be liquid as gaseous. And so what we're looking at is the glide path to doing that in the least disruptive manner.
Yeah. Something's happening with the sound.
Yeah, it's breaking up, Steve. It was hard to hear you.
I have a question. Is this meeting being recorded?
I believe it is, Susan.
Okay, good. I'm glad. My second question is, Amy, will you also be giving a presentation to the city council? Is that the plan?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, very good. Because I'm listening in to hear your perspective on all this, and I think that it's not just us that's listening right now. These meetings, the public, this is an opportunity to educate the public and get their questions answered as well. It's the beginning of an important discussion. That's how I see this meeting. Thank you.
I have a question. What happens on the second unit program? Obviously, somebody comes in, they adopt the new code, they're stuck with the electrifying. Does this mean that they have to, the main house is affected also with this, or what? That they would have to retrofit the main house?
I haven't seen any agency take that on. Almost always, if you're talking about an accessory dwelling unit,
Right.
the unit itself may have to go follow. It will have to fall under new code, and then you can determine whether or not that's included in the REACH code. But the REACH codes are not forcing changes to the existing structures.
Okay.
That's not their mechanism. They work on new construction and major renovations as defined by the city.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a couple questions? I guess, using more electricity or increasing the amount of electricity could potentially increase the demand on service from the public utility, correct?
Who's speaking?
That's Tom Jezrudek, building official. So if we're increasing the usage in a house, in other jurisdictions, have they addressed the fact that there may have to be an increase in the panel size, like a 400 amp panel? And if that's not feasible, is there an exception that they've been building in for that? And then another question I had was, in your presentation, you had said to use an alternate means as a backup source would be a generator. How would you fuel that generator?
Gas.
Yeah, so thank you for those questions. So regarding panel size, and again, this is Amy Ryder. Regarding panel size in particular, a 200 amp panel is typically enough for an all-electric home, and that's standard when new construction these days. So 400 amp panels are pretty unusual. They would have to be quite an exceptional single-family residence to justify that size of a panel increase. So no, typically that's not a problem. And there actually are many technologies on the market today that can actually allow for circuit sharing and things of that nature to help minimize any panel upgrades that might be needed even for existing buildings. So we don't see that being problematic. I mentioned the backup power simply because by allowing for electric, whether you're using a diesel generator, which is certainly not my personal preference, but or a battery backup system on there, or eventually an electric car, and that's where the technology is moving us toward as a generator source. The fact that you have those options is really the intention of the resiliency and electric appliance. Does that answer your question?
So we, on a single family home, a diesel generator, using a diesel generator is a better option than using a natural gas generator. Is that your opinion? Or is that what you're saying?
I prefer not to use a generator at all and to use a battery system, but that can be cost prohibitive at the current time, and it's not for everyone. So I think that if you're going to use a natural gas or propane generator, that is better than a diesel generator, but a generator is a generator, and you still have to provide the fuel for it. So there's challenges with it, but at least you have the option if you really need backup power system.
But that could also be built into the code to the code adoption on what is allowed, what's exempt.
That is true.
And can I answer that, Tom? Would you please speak to this? We had an issue with generators that had come up recently, and we come to the conclusion that none of the generators met the noise requirement to be in Ojai. And that was an issue within the last year. And so you want to speak to how that got resolved, if it did?
That would be outside of my scope. That's a planning directive.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly sure how that was
Okay.
resolved.
So somebody wanted to put in a Generac and they were denied a permit. Generac is a gas. And my preference is, if you're going to have a generator, have it natural gas, because it prevents spillage. Spillage is just insidious with the diesel, and and gas, it really should be propane, hopefully, or natural gas. So,
That issue has not come up before the Planning Commission yet.
This is Bill Wyrick. I actually looked at that, and there's a difference between the code on sound for continuous versus intermittent. And then there's, I think, 15-minute, half hour, and 1 hour. And I believe I actually looked up some of the Generac enclosure generators, and they were okay. They were within the city's noise code just for their test operation. In other words, they usually have a software that programs them to turn on and exercise things for 15 minutes to a half hour every month or so. And that was within our city code, but if the power was out and they're running continuously, then it was somewhat above it. As I recall, that's what I read. Amy, could I ask you a real quick question on biogas?
You may.
I was walking out. I had to walk out when you were finishing up the discussion on the study of demand versus supply in the biogas. Were those United States statistics? Because I know there's a huge difference between Europe, certain parts of Europe, especially Germany and parts of France, and the United States in terms of the supply, the supply of biogas versus demand.
Yeah, those are California specific statistics.
That was California specific, yeah, because one of the things I do know about is that they've made much greater strides in Europe in terms of reusing landfill gas and other forms of biogas than they have in the United States. So thank you. I was wondering where those statistics came from. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Judy, I saw your hand up, but your mic was muted. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
I have a question for Phil, if he's still here. Phil?
Yes, I am. I just unmuted. Go ahead.
You had mentioned that the general plan for Ventura County included a REACH code for new construction. Was that correct? Just for new construction?
I think the way I would put it, that the policy and program to adopt a REACH code in unincorporated Ventura County is part of the county general plan. It has not been developed to a final version that I could really answer that question, but that would be my opinion that as to what should happen in Ventura and in the city of Ojai, that REACH codes be adopted for new construction, for new buildings.
Okay. When I was reading the 9-page document on the city website, I got the impression that the Climate Change Emergency Committee wants to see the end of all gas infrastructure in Ojai in the next 10 years, 9 years. Is that correct? And would that mean that my gas grill wouldn't work anymore?
I think the answer is that the climate committee, recognizing that we really do need to deal with climate change, and we remember the Thomas Fire as a good reason for why we need to deal with climate change. And what's in the report to the city council and on the website are goals for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Ojai, to do Ojai's fair share. And the goal is to eventually eliminate natural gas in buildings and gasoline in vehicles. Now, starting with vehicles, the governor has already done that on his own within the last week. So anyway, those are goals. And no, I don't think you need to worry that your existing gas-fired appliances are going to not be available to you. They will be. This is going to be a gradual change that's made starting with new buildings.
Well, I am in total agreement with your goals, but I'm very concerned about the time frame that you're proposing to accomplish them. And by the way, the new building, doesn't that just all go to the Planning Commission for their input, recommendations?
No, that's zoning and planning and land use.
Okay.
This is Tom. I have a question to either Souza or Tom. Yeah, how is this going to affect the low-income residents? And is the city prepared to offer some kind of an assistance to low-income? Where a few years back, I don't know how many years, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the city had a program where that homeowners, low income, had they couldn't afford to do whatever they needed to do, upgrades or put a new roof on, a new heater. City had a loan program. And when I was at the bank, I actually kind of helped out on that, drawing up the deeds and this and that. But will the city adopt something like this where they'll help some of these low income people that can't afford this?
Should I have a stab at it? My understanding is that there are actually programs that help subsidize this. It's been a while since I looked, but about a year ago when I was looking at Reach Code's options, all the different ways that it could work, I did see online that there were programs. But I don't think, this should not immediately affect low-income people. My understanding is that this is a transition that would be done very thoughtfully and carefully, and it would start with new construction if the council decides to go that route. My own philosophy about this is that if we're going to adopt Reach Codes, we should, concurrently adopt standards where the buildings are energy efficient, and even something so simple as mandating screen doors for rentals. That may sound like a simple thing, but many rentals, the landlord will try to save money by not putting in screen doors so that the home can be cooled at night. I see air conditioners running on cold nights when people should be opening their windows and opening their doors. You need screen doors that are secure. I put that in my own house, and that sounds very simple, but that reduces my use of electricity. We should be encouraging people to put up clotheslines. During the heat of summer, nobody should be running their dryer. These are what we're really talking about is gradual lifestyle changes. That's the only way that climate change is going to be mitigated in the long run is lifestyle changes. That's my sense.
And I agree with you, but I just want to make sure that low income residents aren't left behind on this. And it's becoming, it's made aware because there's significant barriers accessing clean energy resources and making actually them the last to benefit from it.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think we should be very careful that our low income people are not impacted. And this, like I said, this is Reach Codes are not a cure-all. It's one segment, it's one piece of a much bigger puzzle. And one way we can help low income people is by having better public transportation. And we're working on providing safe bike routes. Many low income people ride their bike. I'd like to be able to, so they can do that safely. We have to look at the whole picture. And Reach Codes is a piece of the puzzle.
Right. And it's to educate the public.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go
I'd like
ahead,
to comment-
Bill. I'm
oh,
sorry.
Yeah, this is Phil. I would like to address this question of are we burdening the unfortunate people? And I think the
Fortunate.
know what's being proposed in electrification of buildings is for new buildings, regardless of who's building the new building. Amy has pointed out quite clearly that the cost to build an all electric building is less than a building with electricity and gas, and the operating costs, utility operating costs of electric appliances is cheaper than buildings that have electricity and gas. So what is being proposed here in an all-electric reach code is a money saver for whoever is going to be building a new building. Nobody's talking about mandating, as Judy was questioning, am I going to lose my gas appliances? Nobody's suggesting that everybody in Ojai is going to have to suddenly rip out all their gas and install new electric appliances. That's not what's being proposed.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to say?
Yeah,
about it?
Tom, I would like to weigh in too. Councilwoman Souza. Again, let's go back to what I was talking about, what Tom is alluding to. I spoke to you Sunday, and I said we seem to be doing things at extremely inappropriate times, and we do things that are convenient for certain people and not convenient for others. We have very few people that have the ability to get on Zoom, get off work, and be able to attend 4 o'clock meetings. And it would seem appropriate that if we are going to include people, and I didn't like the word less fortunate, if we are going to be able to include all people that we have here and the working people, that we need to have these things when people can attend them and can watch them. And this is not one of these meetings. This is where few people, this is not where everybody can take off work that is working or those that are retired. So this is not available to a number of the people that are going to be affected most. And I really think it's time that we stop having these meetings at times where people can't be included.
Excuse me, Bob. That's why I asked, is the meeting being recorded so they could watch it later if they so choose? And I thought I made clear that low-income people are not, this is not going to be a hardship. What Phil said, what I heard made it very clear that none of what's being proposed is going to be a hardship for low-income people. And that's very clear to me.
It's a hardship for low-income people to be able to have their input when they can only watch a recorded message.
No, but I'm saying, Bob.
No, that's what I'm saying. They're not here to give the input you're giving.
Okay, but the city council meeting where we will also be reviewing this will be held at 7 o'clock. And of course, anyone watching this is very welcome to speak to individual council members and air out their concerns. So there is a process where they can, air out their concerns. I don't think that's an issue right now.
It seems that we can gloss over things for those people, if we want to call them those people. They come in after the fact is what I'm trying to say. So for what it says, you know what? I find this pretty interesting that we're holding this when the people that are affected the most aren't here to get the input in first. They can wait, the input and everything will be collected, and then it'll go to council. So I think I've said my piece.
I believe this time was proposed by BAB. That's this meeting time.
Actually, it was not.
This is the time provided by BAB, and also on the agenda, there was no link for a public to participate. They could view it, but that is something I believe that Babs coordinated.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think you can blame us for the time.
No, I'm not blaming. I'm just saying you and I spoke about getting people COVID tested during the day when we have a lot of people that don't have the luxury of taking off of work and coming in during the day and participating. And as a city, we seem to do this over and over again.
Who's chairing this meeting?
Well, our
Yeah,
chair,
you know,
our
this
chair
is
is
Tom.
here now. Bill Ulrich has arrived, and he is the chair of the meeting. He's
I don't know if
missing-
Bill's out there or not. Are you out there, Bill?
Yeah,
I
Bill Ulrich is here.
I am.
Bill Ulrich?
Bill Ulrich, are you going to watch the recording? I hope so.
Well, I will after the fact, regrettably. My apologies for my late arrival, but and I'm sure it's been trenchant and interesting. I have, when I first joined, there was a comment that if it's not inappropriate to kind of go back to, because I simply it engendered a question in me, and that was, and I forgive me for not being clear on who made the comment. It may have been a Mr. Columnay, if I'm not mispronouncing your name, or it may have been Mr. White. Made some reference to another participant having stated that all electric construction is actually less than the hybrid that is typical. Was that an accurate restatement?
That's what they said.
No, that's a question for Mr. Columnay or Mr. White. I believe one or the other of them made the comment.
That was Mr. White.
Yeah, this is Phil White. Bill, yes, I did, and I referred to the information that Amy Ryder made in her presentation, where it showed the significant thousands of dollars of less expense
Right.
to construct an all-electric.
Very good. And just to clarify for my late arrival, Ms. Ryder is who?
Hi, I'm the presenter. I was the one who gave the presentation
Okay,
this afternoon.
but you're not on the committee, or at least the 5 names that I have before me in the. So what is your relationship?
Sure, I'm with the Building Decarbonization Coalition.
Building Decarbonization Coalition. Okay, so once again, what is that statement based on?
Sure, give me 1 second and I'll pull up the slide if you'll humor me.
Sure.
Here's the summary slide on cost.
Okay, and this is from SoCal Gas.
So there are 2 studies that are referenced here that were funded by the various folks that you see in the bottom right-hand corner there.
I see. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So once again, I don't source E3 study 2019 and Synapse 2018. Just from a practical perspective, I don't know if any of the other participants in this meeting have a similar background, but my background is very specifically in construction and construction management, has been for 30 years. And pretty much everything from residential, multifamily, all the way through university, public works. So I don't know where those numbers come from, but I think they're, in construction costs, I don't know. That seems that is not, let's put it this way, that's not consistent with my experience. Okay, so whenever cost benefit savings have been utilized to justify things, they typically speaking aren't from what we would use in the construction industry as far as our cost books, if you will. So I also, and I know, or I probably missed where there was a reference to our electrical aggregation adoption that was enacted by City Council. The 100% green power also costs substantially more. And this is from my personal experience on the 2 residential properties that I own in the city of Ojai, that I had to basically get myself out of because of that adoption. It wound up being actually between 7 and 15% more than the Edison feed. And I wasn't really, from my experience, once again, I wasn't convinced that the nature of that it was possible to confirm that the sourcing of that power, once it enters the grid, is as clean as everyone is promoting it to be. But once again, that's my personal experience, but I can't personally base any determination or recommendation that I would have on a presentation that tells me I'm going to save money somehow. That has not been the case to date in my personal experience. And once again, as I've indicated, it kind of depends on the sourcing for the basis for the statement that is presented here. Because it simply doesn't make sense to me based on my experience in construction. But thank you for the clarification.
Absolutely, and I'm happy to offer, I'm happy to send you the copies of these studies if you wanted to dive into them. But at a really high level, what the study summarized, and I am not an author of the study, so I can't speak to the specifics except as a reader, but the framework is that because you're eliminating the gas infrastructure, all of the costs associated with that, both from wherever the pipe is to the meter and then behind the meter within the walls, that inherently is reducing almost an entire trade. So that has a cost savings affiliated with it. And then on the backside, that there is some cost parity for most of the appliances, not all, but most of them. And that between the two, you have a net cost savings. So happy to supply more information. These are not the only 2 studies out there. They're just the 2 that I referenced for this particular presentation.
Okay, and also, what is the gas rates are rising? What's that based on?
Based on approved by the CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission has already approved gas rate hikes for Southern California gas. Right, but have they also not approved corollary electric rate hikes? I really wish you were here for the whole presentation. I'll show you some more. There's lots of, where is that
Well, that's
slide?
actually, excuse me, that's just a yes or no.
So yes, there's an increase for both, and no, they're not at the same level.
Okay, all right. So, well, and then there's other inherent questions regarding the efficiencies of appliances. That's neither here nor there. My bigger concern, of course, which I'm sure you already addressed, is the lack of redundancy in utility sources for typical, but also that, the community is built out. So how many, were you able to address how many projected units within the city this would be applicable to?
We didn't talk about the specifics of that. I know that there's not a lot of construction, but a few projects on, kind of in the wings.
Mm-hmm.
But really the concept behind a reach code like this that addresses new construction and major renovations is that you don't make the problem any worse, and you capture, when it is most cost effective to do so, any advantage you might be able to get in terms of shifting towards an all electric construction.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, I grew up in a gold medallion home in Southern California. It was at the time, which is the early '60s. It was the cutting edge of technology, I guess. But we didn't have brownouts until about 15 years later. And then also now we have this flat out power outages for other reasons. So that that lack of redundancy is kind of a concern to me from several perspectives, but I'm sure that's been addressed as well.
It has. I'm actually tempted to see if who was paying attention wants to answer that question.
Oh, would you? Yes, please.
I'm happy to answer it, but if anybody else wants to chime in, please do so.
Okay, well, I would ask members of the Building Appeals Board what they learned from the presentation relative to the loss of redundancy.
Rather than put someone on the spot, I think I'll just go ahead and answer and we can discuss, but I do want to encourage others to join the conversation so that's not just you and I. But yeah, so absolutely, as was pointed out, most new appliances require electric ignition with the exception of the gas stoves. New gas appliances require an electric ignition. So a water heater, a dryer, a furnace, all have electric ignitions for new appliances. So they no longer have that redundancy embedded in them when the power goes out for safety reasons. Gas stoves can be lit, most of them, not all of them, with a match or a lighter, but you can't run the exhaust fan, which then gets rid of all of the pollutants that are being caused by running gas there. So you have to be very careful and open your windows so as not to get, carbon monoxide and other things, burning inside in homes. Not generally a good idea without an exhaust fan. So those are the redundancy issues. There's definitely more to it than that, and we can discuss more in detail, but I saw a hand up. Dale, did you want to jump in? You're on mute.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm still working and I have to go show property now. So I'm the secretary, but I'm bowing out, and I'll find out tomorrow how it all ended. Sorry, I have to go to work.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, so, all right. Effectively, that would be, so say we're applying this to the sort of things that that I foresee as being new projects within the city seem to be commercial for the most part. So what we're saying effectively is in the event of a power outage, and this is at a restaurant, they don't have any lights anyway, but they don't have any means of processing food. And so they basically are out of business at that particular point.
Unless they have a backup source of electricity. That is correct.
Correct. Okay. Backup source of electricity are the REACH codes require that or make that as an option?
That is up to each individual city to determine.
Okay. Now, what happens with since we have projections on costs, do we have projections from the utilities, the two main utilities or three main utilities that we're dealing with in the state regarding their projected power outages due to high fire hazard conditions?
I don't have that data.
Okay, we have any sense of that? I mean, I know PG&E's been quite, I'd say, vocal about pending and projecting power outages. I don't know if Edison's been doing the same thing. They don't have the same exposure, quite the same exposure relative to forested areas for their grid, but so we don't know what the implications might be by adopting something that will require complete reliance on the grid with a backup, and that would, to the best of my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, involves batteries.
So I'm sorry, are you trying to just make a point about the resiliency of the grid itself? Is that where you're going with your comment?
Projected outages.
Right. Okay. I see them as very related, but yeah, I don't know what the sheer quantity of projected outages might be.
Okay, percentage of days. I mean, percentage of hours. We've all here in Ojai, we've experienced that within the last year.
Sure. I live in Sonoma County. I'm very well aware of power outages and fire and all of the risks. Okay. So, I mean, I can look out my window and see it. So yeah, no need there. But I think what you're getting at though is, and the larger point that, at least the way I see it in terms of reach codes, is that the difference between an all electric home and a mixed fuel home for a new construction project in terms of its ability to ride the wave of any power outage, regardless of how many, is very similar, with the exception potentially of cooking. But I would actually encourage folks that have an electric stove that are looking for alternative cooking methods to use something like a portable propane camping grill instead of burning in their home where there's other consequences.
Well, yeah, but that's also, propane's really dangerous stuff. So even in knowledgeable hands, especially, and I wouldn't characterize that. Okay, well, how about the instead of some of the weeds here that we've been, or at least that I've been inquiring about, how many? Once again, do you have any projection for how many projects this would affect in the city of Ojai, say, in the next year?
Someone from the planning commission or from the building department maybe have a better sense of that than I do?
Well, I think it's incumbent upon, if someone's promoting something or pitching something or whatever the word is, they do have to understand the community and the setting for the proposed implementation. Ojai is in many different ways remarkably unique, and one of them is it's effectively built out. I'm sure the building official will be able to tell us how many new construction permits were issued last year. Tom? Tom?
Yeah, I had to unmute myself.
Okay.
We only had, it's very few newly constructed homes that we build every year. I want to say probably less than 5 a year.
I would gainsay 1 to 3. Having looked over the numbers for the last decade, I would average them along that 0 multifamily, and then the question of how many commercial new construction projects are permitted each year, would you say?
New construction?
Yeah. Well, it's called a development. Somebody builds a kitchen.
Well, so again, this is kind of a hard question to answer. That's going to be, I'll explain why. It's a hard question because it's all relative. So if the codes are being applied to new homes only, then that's the answer. If it's being applied to commercial projects, which it very well could, if that's what the direction that is going to be presented. Mm-hmm. So, or is it going to be, even in the presentation, major modifications to an existing house?
Well, okay, but just take a swing at my question. How many new projects that would involve a kitchen and the implementation of an electric kitchen instead of a hybrid kitchen? Simply in the last year or so, how many new projects were there?
I can't get on.
I'm not exactly sure. A kitchen in a resident, like a kitchen remodel?
Commercial context. We already went to residential, right? Now we're at commercial. which there
Okay,
are
so you're saying how many new restaurants have come in?
Yeah.
I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to say it's somewhere in the same vicinity, 1 to 3.
Okay.
Okay, so having said that, now we're in 2 to 6. And I'm not sure that makes this community a good subject or a good fit for the practical application of REACH codes and the projected application of REACH codes, specifically because the city doesn't do too much new permit issuance.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Bill, I do not see your point. We cannot predict the future. The fact that there's going to be very little construction or a lot of construction, to me, has absolutely nothing to do with this. The point is to start making codes that help us reduce our emissions. That's the point.
Well, actually, I disagree with that because.
No, you do.
Well, no. I disagree with what you're saying. It is relevant because if you're trying to apply something, if it's not effectively applicable, it's not going to have any. Literally, it's not going to have any effect. And the issue, from my perspective, is I have been looking at how much construction has been going on in the community for, like I said, at least a decade, as well as how much can go on because we have these other implications I'm sure you're aware of, RANA numbers, the amount of ADUs we have, the amount of ADUs we can have, et cetera. And this is applicable to all of that. So the issue becomes one of where these proposed ordinances can be applied and what is their effects and implications going into the future. To say we don't know how much construction is going on, you're right. If the city doesn't do something to harden itself from fire, the whole place can go up in smoke too, and then we'd have lots of construction. You're right.
Chair, can I ask a question of Phil or Amy? A serious question.
Sure.
We have Suzanne's that one of these days might come back online, and we have the Oaks that might come back online, and we have a group called the Playhouse, a playground. I don't know what the rest of them is, but they're looking at developing Chaparral. And we have a number of other, what do I want to say, aspirations, like doing something at the bowling alley. How do we heat large facilities in large homes and restaurants cost effectively? How would we do that? I see these heaters like we have at the, I'm going to call it the beer joint on Montgomery, which was a cleaner, which is a metal, military building with a tin roof. And they generally have these big heaters hanging down like they do in the gymnasiums, and they're gas and they've got a big fan and they blow a great big huge jet of hot air. How do these commercial venues, some of the school buildings, some of the new buildings, some of the refurbished buildings, how are we going to heat these buildings? And how are we going to heat? When you got a 4,000 square foot home and it's a new home, what is the cost effective? Is there a cost effective way to use all electric in a new home that's of any scale? I know we've got the old ones, and there's a couple of statements I'm going to make. First of all, natural gas does not need a vent because there's not a single oven that comes with a vent that's an electric vent that you need for electricity. So I kind of got a little bit of a problem with that one. The majority of the 3,700 homes here in Ojai, we're lucky if the majority of them have 100 amp service. Forget the 200 amp service, 100 amp service. And that's quite expensive. It's like the fire department was telling us it was only a few bucks to put in sprinklers. And then we found out that it was going to be way bigger once they started taking the asbestos and the arsenic and the lead paint and all those other things they had to remove. And I guess, Phil, I can see your hand. So, Chair, are you looking? No. Phil, why don't you go ahead and answer?
Okay, thanks, Bob. Well, it's a really good question. How do you heat a building with electricity? You know, it's kind of counterintuitive to those of us who've grown up with furnaces. But I am a mechanical engineer. I've been a mechanical engineer now for more than 40 years. I have designed the new HVAC, heating, ventilating, air conditioning systems for many schools in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. Today I was in Santa Paula, where we're looking at a school that's going to add air conditioning and tear out their old wall furnaces and be replaced with heat pumps. And heat pumps can provide cooling and heating with the same equipment. This is what's happening in the Ojai school district as well. It's pretty much the standard for new construction to install heat pumps. And I'll use the example of Matilaha Junior High School and Nordhoff High School, where we've done modernization projects that are being built right now. These new buildings are going to be new and modernized buildings are going to be conditioned with heat pumps and the natural gas removed for heating. So it is feasible. Again, you were talking about 100 amp panels. You're talking existing buildings, and you're right. An existing building, residence with a 100 amp panel, it's in adding a car charger and electric everything, that's not enough. But we're not proposing putting reach codes on existing buildings, existing residences. I want to talk to Bill's concern about how many buildings are we talking about, and he's absolutely right that based on the last few years. And this would be true in the unincorporated Ojai Valley as well. There hasn't been all that much new construction. And yet in the county jurisdiction of the Ojai Valley, that's the future, is to require all electric buildings. And yes, it's small, and you're doing a handful of buildings a year with accessory dwelling units upon us in both the city and the county. We are likely to see a lot of new construction for these second residences on properties. The other thing I want to point out is what I've heard from the city council in Ojai is they're an extraordinary city council in dealing with climate change. They are the first city in the county to declare that there is a climate emergency. They're the first to appoint a climate emergency mobilization committee. They're the first to have adopted all electric landscape equipment. This city council, from what I hear, likes to be a leader in dealing with climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And in the committee's opinion, moving forward with a REACH code for new construction is another example of something the city of Ojai could do. Granted, it would have an only modest effect in the beginning because of the lack of a lot of new construction. But it sets the example for all the other cities in the county. So that would be my response to the concerns that both Bill and Bob raised.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Steve?
Yes, thank you. I'm trying to understand. Phil says we're not going to apply this to existing buildings, but the committee's goal is to eliminate the gas infrastructure in the city. How do you square those two?
It's a reasonable question, and it's the same question that was asked earlier by your fellow committee member there. It is a goal. It was Judy's question about whether she would be able to retain her gas equipment. It is a goal, and you have to start somewhere, and our proposal is to start with new construction. If there's a major remodel of a building that happens, Bob mentioned the bowling alley, maybe that's an opportunity to apply this to an existing building that would be reconstructed. I think our intent is to do what we can, starting small and moving forward with reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Well, I understand your goal. I'm curious as to at what point do you expect that you would achieve your goal of eliminating the gas infrastructure? My house is 90 years old, all right, and I have gas and I have electricity, but and I'm not going to live another 90 years, but I'd like to understand at what point you do, as a committee, expect to reach your goal of eliminating the natural gas infrastructure in the city.
Well, Steve, I'll speak for myself. I don't speak for the committee, but I acknowledge that we do have natural gas. I'm of the opinion that natural gas and Southern California Gas Company will be with us for a long time. However, I do see that it's changing, that there is a move from using natural gas for heating. And I'll use again the example of the schools, where the schools are taking out natural gas and replacing heating with electricity. That's happening right now. We have many projects here in the county that are doing just that. So everything that's done is building by building. We got to start somewhere, and new buildings, in my opinion, is the place to start.
Okay, I have a question about that. Actually, two observations and then a question. My understanding is ADUs would be specifically excluded from a REACH code extension. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so this is Amy, and that depends on the city council's directive. They are included in many cities and excluded in a handful of them.
Or ADUs, REACH codes applicable to ADUs?
They can be, yes.
My understanding is that from that state law actually prevents that, because that is a further restriction on the construction or the adoption of them. But okay, that question will leave up in the air then. Since we're talking about starting someplace from an incremental perspective, wouldn't it seem like it'd have more of a carbon, a very definitive and directly perceptive carbon impact by prohibiting fireplaces, prohibiting barbecues, prohibiting many of the means of injecting carbon directly into the atmosphere on our local basis, into the valley, in other words. It's a means of starting someplace that actually doesn't take a revision of the infrastructure. You know, all that is legislation. That was a question, actually.
Are you curious about
Michelle, you want to take a crack at that?
Well, in terms of the emissions associated with buildings, the largest source, Amy, I don't think you prepared that pie graph that I've seen before, where it basically breaks down the largest sources of natural gas emissions are space heating and water heating, and the fireplaces, the stove, the pool, those uses of gas are much smaller than the water and space heating. And so in terms of a GHG impact, that's where we're going for the whole house, whole commercial space, new construction.
So those studies don't contemplate or include fireplaces, barbecues.
I think they do. That's included in the total emissions pie chart for emissions in buildings.
Okay, and without seeing them, does anyone care to hazard a guess as far as what that is?
This is Steve Colomé. The group that has looked most closely at greenhouse gases is the California Air Resources Board, and the two that you mentioned are extremely small relative to the combustion of natural gas.
Okay, but that's why the city of Los Angeles has prohibited fireplaces.
No, the reason that they have prohibited fireplaces is because of particulate air pollution, not greenhouse gases.
Oh, and the distinction is, aren't they both carbon sources?
No, there's a clear distinction. Particulate matter is a criteria air pollutant, and it is because of its health effects. And fireplaces are a major source of particulate air pollution. They are a minor source of greenhouse gases.
Okay, thank you.
And Chair, maybe Amy, you would be nice enough to go over something that Bill missed that I think is very, very important. You made a statement, and maybe I'll be able to understand it this time too. You made a statement that it needs to have some type of an affordable component. That was at the start of your initial presentation. Could you bring that back up again and explain specifically how that works now that we've gone through this whole thing? It has a lot more meaning as to how that affordability component enters into this thing.
Yeah, let me grab this slide 1 second. Okay, so for REACH code specifically, they do have to meet these 3 requirements, one of which is cost effectiveness. And for new construction, what that looks at is the initial cost of construction, and then the life cycle bill costs, as well as the societal costs. They have 2 different metrics that they look at for the 30-year loan period of a new home or business. That's how they do the math for cost effectiveness at the state level. That's not the only way to do it, but that's the most common. And so cost effectiveness is inherently required for anything you might impose as a code amendment. There's also requirements that you're not preempting equipment that is on the federal efficiency list. So that means that you can't choose just one piece of equipment and say that this one has to be special outside of the entire efficiency of the building. And then you still have to meet energy code. So you can't require something that would lessen the efficiency requirement overall. Those are the 3 requirements of a REACH code, but cost effectiveness is certainly the one that is most commonly inquired about.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And one thing I'll just add to the conversation about the not too many buildings that are happening in Ojai specifically, is I see that as, and many cities I've heard this from, they see this as a fairly low risk entry point to making action toward their climate action goals, because it doesn't impose restrictions on many people. It's new construction only, so you're not getting it the low income or populations that are more sensitive to those cost things, even though there's a savings element. And we're seeing it certainly move forward with affordable housing units. It sounds like that's not the case in Ojai. But really from the perspective of, even if it's 10 years, even if it's 30 years, when Ojai is able to move away from natural gas infrastructure, the fiscal responsibility of not putting in infrastructure that won't make it through its entire lifespan and you're having to pay for it regardless is one of the things that I just want to highlight for you, that let's not invest in something that you don't expect to last for its entire lifespan.
The thought occurred to me that I would like to make some inquiries in communities, particularly the building departments that have adopted these codes, to see how that's impacted development. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So could you identify? I'm sure you have, and obviously I didn't see that, but could you identify, say, 3 to 6 communities that I can reach out to their building department?
There are many. I guess my follow-up question before I answer is there a particular type of reach code that you're most interested in? I've heard from building officials in particular where they have all electric as the requirement, no natural gas is allowed at all, that they really like the fact they no longer have to worry about natural gas and all of the safety measures and testing that is required with that. And I could point you to those cities, but I don't know that that's necessarily what you're looking for. There are 34 cities in the state who have adopted something, but they vary in terms of what type of ordinance.
Well, I think it'd be the size of the community might be helpful. Something mid-sized or smaller. In other words, something the size of our larger cities in the county are 120 to 160,000. Average. I guess they might be a little bit larger than that. But also, I was under the impression how comprehensive of a reach code is being proposed that we are hearing at this presentation this evening? All electric or?
So what? I've heard a couple of different things. Certainly, it seems like the committee has heard from the council that the interest is in all electric, but that there might be some inquiry as to what other approaches might be available. So I'm not proposing any specific one, although I've heard that is the leaning of the group, but it's up for discussion. That's really part of why we're here.
And you understood that to be from council?
That's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Right. Well, obviously, from the climate committee, what is your understanding?
This is Phil. I'll speak for that. We haven't really taken a position. The options that are likely to be presented to the council. The council has expressed an interest in seeing a couple of options. And one option would be the all electric or required electric. The other would be electric preferred, which would allow natural gas to be built into the building with a proviso that additional energy efficiency improvements be made. So those are the two, and the committee really hasn't taken a formal position on it.
Okay. Right. Very good. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone else on the BAB have any questions?
Yeah, Bill, how many dozens of millions of dollars did the gas company spend this last couple of years tearing up all of downtown Ojai and replacing every major feed line through the center of town from one end of the valley to the other?
They're still working on it today out over by Seafresh.
I listen to music with a headphone if I'm listening to music on here.
I can hear you, Steve Quillisi.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
that's okay.
I have to leave the building for another meeting at 6 o'clock. So I thank you for your time. I'm asking my questions because as a member of the Planning Commission, I need to understand what the City Council is going to do to change our processes or standards for looking at design review permits and that kind of thing. But I thank you all for your time, and I'll follow up by looking at the rest of the meeting online when I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. So are there any other questions from the Building Appeals Board members? Okay. I'm going to take that as a no. Is there any other comments from anyone else?
I have a comment. I do hope that Bill Ulrich, that you'll watch the entire meeting that you missed, and that also I'm going to request that Dale Hansen watch the part that she missed. I think that's very important.
Yes, absolutely. It's incumbent upon us both.
This is Phil. I would like to thank the two city council members and the members of BAB and the building official for attending this meeting. It's really good to have your input and hear what you think and ask questions, and really appreciate what Amy Ryder has come with all this information. This is happening all over the state, and now it's landed here in Ojai. Thank you so much for participating.
Yes. Thank you, Amy. It was Amy Ryder, right, that did the webinar last summer, I think it was. I attended something, you know.
It's very possible that you've heard my voice before. Yes, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, this is Tom. I have one last thing, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Go right.
I know there was a question that came up. I think it might have been from Bob regarding what date the California looks at trying to solve this. And I believe that they're the GHG emissions by 40% by 2030, and then to be completely done by 2045. But my main concern, Bill, is that, I mean, we all know the benefits of transitioning off the gas. And it's not going to be easy, obviously, for a lot of Californians, especially for low-income residents and for the renters who rent, dependent on their landlords and what have you. But my main concern is that our council take a look at helping some of these low-income people here. That's it.
I agree with you, Tom, because what we do for low-income people has a positive effect on the whole community. And if we don't pay attention to people's hardships, that will have ultimately has a negative effect on the whole community. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I think we need to make people aware, like we want to make people aware of coming forward on the second unit program, which is still questionable in some people's minds.
Yeah, I agree. We need to promote that more.
Okay. At this point, then if we're all done, then I would adjourn the meeting.
Great.
Thank you. Glad you made it.
Well,
Thank you.
Mr. Ulrich,
Yes.
is there a recommendation for council?
At this point, we don't. I don't have enough. I don't have enough information. We have one of our members missing. We've been asked to look further in at two of us at the portions of the meeting that we missed. So from my perspective, I don't think And we can take a quick survey here of the other members, whether we feel we are at a point where we could make a recommendation. I don't personally think I have enough information. So what do you think, Judy?
I am able to support the proposition of new construction, major new development. I have quite a few other questions about the time frame on this and how it would be handled with small businesses and residences. So I do have more questions about that.
Okay, all right. Dale's gone. How about you, Bob?
Wow. I still need to know how we're going to do some things. What I would like to do is we've had some people talk about incrementally. And again, incrementally, we have some great resources, and I would like to know what some incremental factors are. And so we have somebody that can really explain the difference between greenhouse gas and what a fireplace does. And those are things that, I think we need to continue engaging, get some more explanation, because those are very important differences that most people don't understand. If we're talking about R1 residences only, that's going to be different than multiple family, which is just about non-existent if we're going to talk about commercial. And then we need to get some definition. When we say new, for the purposes, my understanding for the health department, county health department, for the county of Ventura, when the Oaks goes to open, since it has not had a kitchen for 6 months, that is a new kitchen. That is going to be a circa 2020 or 21 new kitchen. And so then you're going to have to frame that as to what needs to be done with that. So what I'd like is a few more parameters and guidelines. And what I'd like to do is have a point person with the climate committee or other people with a climate committee and help us understand things. So when I hear someone say, well, we're looking at the majority of gas in heating, water, and building space, what are the things that we can do immediate to propose some Title IX? That's what we do. We propose building components, not land use. That's not zoning. That's not the planning commission. That's us. What are some of the things we can do to propose to start somewhere? Let's start somewhere. And if it's, we're going to start doing solar assist water heater at a certain point, if we're going to do X, Y, Z, there are some things that we can do immediately to start. So if you're going to open up a hotel, it would appear to me that maybe in this hotel that we're going to want some solar assisted water heater. And it would appear that if we're opening up a hotel restaurant combination at the bowling alley, it would appear that if we want to open up the Playhouse again, we're going to have to figure out how we're going to heat that thing. We have a new restaurant coming online, I believe, where the old Jester was. It may be too late to put some codes in there, but we are continuing to develop, and I think we need to take opportunities. And then I think a question was asked, and I think we need to go to the city attorney and get an answer about ADUs. Well, I'm very unhappy about the Planning Commission and what we do in Title 10. If you have a power line behind your house like Steve Quillisi has, and he puts in an ADU, he has to underground the utilities for the ADU, yet the house has still got that wire swinging there. So let's get some things that make some consistency, and let's find out. We have somebody say ADUs are in the mix. That's fine. We have somebody that says ADUs are exempt. That's fine. But one of them's wrong. And before we go ahead and start saying that we want to do things, let's find out where we really are. Because we've done this too often. We've done that for the 25 years I've lived here. And then we find out later that the rules aren't really the rules. So let's come up with some shortcut things. Let's see if we can get the climate committee to give us some cost savings and some factors. And then within the city, I know that there was a county program and there's a city program where there's money available for solaric fans, for hot water, for other items that can start reducing carbon right now. And they can borrow the money and it comes with contractors to put it in. So it's pretty painless for people. So that's my recommendation. Can I make a recommendation that we take A, B, or C? I think because we're looking at somewhere between 2 and 6 units, if we don't do it tonight, we'll certainly get it done this year, and we'll certainly start coming up with some components where we can get the council to, make a directive and figure out what needs to be implemented.
I have a question. Is Bill Wyrick still on in the meeting?
I think he left.
Okay, maybe I can ask Tom. Tom, do you know if this is going to go to council regardless if there's a recommendation or not?
It is my understanding that it has been indicated that it will go to council sometime in October. I do believe the mayor said that he wanted it to come back to council. So we're just trying to get a recommendation. And to be honest, a recommendation can be that we need more time to soak in the information that we got, and we need to analyze it further before we can give a definite recommendation to council.
Tom, I second that. I second that motion.
I can't. So you have to say it, and then it has to be seconded. But that is a recommendation that you can give. If that, so be it. If you need further information or want to soak it in more, that's your prerogative, and that can be a recommendation. We just want to make sure that we present to council how let's, for lack of a better term, the temperature of the BAB, and get a full understanding of how you guys are.
Okay. All right.
Your opinion.
Okay, so what I'm hearing then is it's clear that we don't have enough information or to make a recommendation at this point. We need further study, research, further information, however you want to describe that. So having said that, do I hear a motion?
Bill, I have a question. Since this was adopted in January of 2020, it's Title 24, Part 6, and there's 20 other cities, I believe, in California that are already working on this. It'd be advantageous to us, I would think, to talk to somebody or see what they're up to. Rather than us creating it all over again, they may have done a lot of our work.
Yeah, it would seem prudent to do that. So at this point, that's what I'm interested in doing personally. So, but okay, do I hear a motion then, rather than a second of Tom's framework? Would you like Bob?
I move that we table this until for further discussion.
Okay, I'm going to make a recommendation that we
motion.
I'm going to make a motion that we ask. When you're asking for a small, we have 484 cities. We have 34 cities that adopted the 7%. We have less than 20 cities out of 484 cities that are our size cities that have the scope of what we have. But we have some cities that we kind of think are, pretty good. They're pretty straight shooters. They, have pretty good rules and pretty good quality of lifestyles. One of them where I lived a lot of years, my kids were born, San Luis Obispo, just went through this entire process.
Yeah.
And so it might be something for us to study and see what they're doing. San Luis Obispo is a 250-year-old city. It is not building. It's not doing a lot of things. And so it would be interesting to see, because they've got 10 times more old stock than we do. And they have an awful lot more renters than we do. And they have an awful lot of the exact same problems to a much bigger scale. And so I would recommend that we go ahead and we get a hold of somebody and get the inside on what transpired there. But I really think that we need to liaison with the climate committee. We need to get some specs on some items. So I move that we contact San Luis Obispo, get the specifics, that we come up with a list no later than 2 weeks from now of components within Title IX that can change as a start. Send those to the climate committee and have them give us some savings factor in carbon and what's doable and not doable. And I don't want to get into the fireplace thing where we think it's one item, but it actually ends up being another. So we need to help them guide us on this. And we do the work this week and we get back to the city council, and just within 2.5 weeks prior to not losing another meeting, we make a recommendation. And if the recommendation is A, B, or C, all electric, partial electric, build it with electric, but have the infrastructure in, at least we got a place to go and we've got a place to discuss. Right now, we have no place to discuss.
Still don't hear a motion.
A motion is we contact San Luis Obispo and find out how they came to the conclusion of adopting REACH codes and which REACH codes they adopted. They did adopt REACH codes.
Okay.
Which ones and how they did them. I lived there for a lot of years.
Okay.
And so again, they're like us. So we get a hold of them. We'll figure out who's going to get a hold of who. If we have to, I'll call them and get a hold of people in their building department and have them send the information of what, why, and where they came up with the relevance.
I don't know if you nominated yourself, but it's sounding like it. So
well, it's I don't want this thing to go on forever. One of the things we do in this town is we stall everything to death. We starve it to death. We ignore it to death. We discuss it to death. I'm just tired of that.
Okay. So is there a second?
I'll second it, Bill.
Did you, Tom, did you get what the motion was?
Yeah.
No. So, right now we don't have direction from council to spend any time on staff time on this item. So that's what we're trying. That if that's what the BAB would like, is for the council to authorize time to be spent on this.
No, Tom. Tom, I don't want staff or the city involved. The BAB can do it. We know how to do it.
Okay, so then the problem is I need a recommendation to bring to council, or the staff needs a recommendation to bring to council.
Right. It sounds as if that the BAB is unable to make any recommendation at this time, pending further information from both outside resources as well as the Climate Emergency Committee.
Perfect.
All right. All right. Now, since I offered that, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Yes.
Okay. Shall we have a vote? Roll call. Tom?
Dale's gone. Go ahead.
I'll take Dale's job.
Okay.
Tom?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Myself? Yes. Who am I missing?
Me.
Well, I think you're for it, but I'll
That's yes as well. So we had unanimity for. Okay. All right. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. In that case, then thank everyone for hanging in there. I notice everybody else left. They must have a debate to watch. I thank you, Tom, and council person, Francina, and the members of the BAB for their time and their efforts. And at this point, then I will close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I learned a lot. Thank you very much. Very educational.
Very good. Good evening.